A Sunday night that changed everything. It was supposed to be another ordinary Sunday at my parents' house, a comfortable ritual I'd come to accept as part of adulthood. I remember the drive through the tree-lined streets of Cedar Grove, a quiet suburb northwest of Atlanta, Georgia. My little Honda hummed along the asphalt, trunk rattling with leftover takeout containers, and my work bag tossed in the back seat. The autumn air was brisk, filled with the scent of turning leaves and distant wood smoke. I always felt a pull, equal parts nostalgia and dread, each time I turned onto my childhood street. The houses were mostly unchanged: white fences, tidy lawns, holiday wreaths on every door. From the outside, nothing ever seemed to shift in Cedar Grove. My name is Jessica Anderson. I'm 29, analytical almost to a fault, and fiercely independent. For years, I defined myself by relentless hard work, long nights crunching financial models, weekends spent poring over spreadsheets, every spare dollar funneled into my future. I'd always believed if I played by the rules, focused and sacrificed, it would all pay off. My savings account, the symbolic tally of my adulthood, had finally crested at $155,000. I'd kept the total close to my chest, not because I was secretive, but because I valued it for what it was: hard-earned, truly mine. Stepping through the front door that Sunday, the familiar swirl of scents, Mom's chicken pot pie, Dad's aftershave, wrapped around me. My older brother, Chris, was already lounging on the couch, eyes glued to his phone, tapping out texts. For a few precious minutes, it was all laughter and clinking dishes, the easy banter of family who knew each other's flaws and foibles as well as their own. It never once crossed my mind that by the end of dinner, everything I believed about family, fairness, and loyalty would be put to a test that would change my life completely. We gathered around the same old maple dining table, every scratch and water ring a family memory, and dug into Mom's famous casserole. Dad launched into one of his classic stories about college baseball. Chris complained about Atlanta traffic, and I let myself relax. For just a moment, it felt like any other Sunday. Predictable, safe. But midway through dessert, Chris cleared his throat. There was a shift in his tone, a strange tightness in his jaw that immediately set me on alert. He looked at me, then at our parents,
Jess, I need your help.
his eyes shimmering with something between desperation and defiance. "Jess, I need your help," he said. His voice was quieter than usual, almost pleading. He explained, haltingly at first, that he'd racked up $110,000 in gambling debts. As the words spilled out, poker losses, credit cards maxed out, desperate bets gone wrong. The pieces clicked together, and reality twisted. He didn't ask. He demanded. He wanted my savings, every cent, and he wanted me to co-sign a new mortgage for him, to bail him out of the mess he'd made. It wasn't a request. It was an expectation, a given, because that's what family does. As his voice grew more insistent, I looked at Mom and Dad, searching their faces for disbelief, for someone to suggest this wasn't just or fair. But instead, I saw a cold, quiet agreement, a resignation. My sacrifice, they decided, was the fair price for his mistakes. In a heartbeat, every late night, every skipped vacation, every dollar I'd ever saved was reduced to a bargaining chip between my future and his failure. The words, "You're letting us down," from my father and my mother's chilling ultimatum, "Sign the mortgage or don't come back," rang in my head like sirens. I left that night with my hands shaking, every muscle tense, my heart pounding, for reasons I didn't fully understand yet. I had thought my adulthood was secure, that all my careful planning had built me a fortress. In less than an hour, Loyalty and guilt threatened to burn it to the ground. That Sunday became the axis on which my life would turn, forcing me to decide, once and for all, whose future I was fighting to protect. The silent years, under the shadow of family. Growing up in our quiet slice of suburban upstate New York, my family had the polished gleam of a perfect postcard for anyone passing by. A neat colonial house, immaculate lawn, and matching minivan, always freshly washed in the driveway. My father, Gregory Ross, was the district manager for a hardware supply company, the type who left for work before sunrise and returned with dusty hands and stories to share over dinner. My mother, Caroline, manned the accounts of a local bakery, her days a blur of receipts and recipe cards, ever practical and endlessly patient. But from as early as I can remember, I sensed an invisible script at play. My brother Ryan, 3 years older, was the obvious star. Broad-shouldered and friendly, he was a natural on the baseball field, quick with a joke that made adults throw their heads back in laughter. Every year, his home runs and report cards seemed to light up the room. I was, in contrast, the quiet one, small, brown-haired, keeping busy with library books and colored pencils, happiest wrapped in the corner armchair, tracing out sums and words in battered notebooks. The world of my childhood was filled with the hush of being overlooked. I can still recall that the afternoon of my first county spelling bee win. I had practiced for weeks, the list of words tucked under my pillow every night. I came home, certificate pressed flat beneath my hand, heart giddy for their pride. But that night, our house was awash in celebration for Ryan's playoff victory. Streamers, cupcakes, neighbors dropping by to congratulate. My slip of paper was placed on the side table and forgotten, gathering crumbs and dust. I didn't mind at first. It's funny, the way children absorb the logic of a household without question. Brandon, Ryan, was louder, braver, the epicenter of my parents' world. I fell into a supporting role, setting the table, double-checking the calendar for everyone's games and appointments, watching from the bleachers as Mom recorded every one of Ryan's innings. I threw myself into school, not out of rebellion, but for the solace of numbers and words. The library was my refuge after classes. The ballet of equations and grammar rules, a predictable order I could hold on to. Even in elementary school, I learned how to fade into the background during family parties. My skill with multiplication tables, or later with balancing a checkbook, was something I clung to in private triumphs. Middle school sharpened my independence. I started helping Mom with grocery budgeting. Sometimes I tagged along to the bakery to sort receipts, watching numbers stack neatly into predictable sums. Dad would ruffle my hair and call me reliable, but his eyes never quite sparkled the way they did for Ryan's trophies. There was no malice in it, a quiet kind of neglect, like sunlight passing over the same patch of grass day after day, leaving other corners shadowed. By the time I reached high school, my role was cemented. Ryan was captain of the varsity team, and I was the quiet achiever, rarely missing an A, but never the cause for a parade. I found part-time work at the town library, shelving books and managing the register in the soft-lit warmth of the reference desk. My first paycheck was small, but the pride was enormous. I opened a savings account in my name, filling it dollar by dollar while dreaming of a future shaped by my own design. Through it all, I learned early that value wasn't what my family saw. It was what I silently built for myself. I let go of chasing applause, focusing instead on skills and savings, on creating a life whose milestones wouldn't be missed simply because they were quiet. And all those years, while my parents and brother reveled in victories and loud celebrations, I grew sturdier in shadow, a strength I would one day have to draw on more than I ever imagined. Urgent, growing up and learning independence. By the time I entered high school, my desire for independence was no longer a quiet whisper, but a roar inside my chest. The pattern at home was impossible to ignore. Mike was allowed to drift through classes, experiment with rebellion, and still have my parents' unwavering support. I, on the other hand, learned that if I wanted something, respect, pride, even money for new shoes or college application fees, it had to come from me, and only me. Sophomore year, I picked up my first part-time job at the corner bookstore a few blocks from home. The store smelled like old paper and coffee. Its creaky wooden floors and endless labyrinth of shelves quickly became my small sanctuary. Every Saturday and Sunday, I stacked bestsellers, rang up patient grandmothers and harried college students, and swept sawdust that seemed impossible to banish. Tedious? Maybe. But that paycheck, $30, then $60, then $100, felt like a ticket to a world where my effort mattered. The first thing I bought was a simple checking account at a local bank, opened with trembling hands and a sense that, in a small way, I was finally gaining control of my own story, balancing schoolwork, a job, and the quiet pressure to prop up everyone else wasn't easy. Most nights after my shift, I'd bike home under Ohio's soft, sprawling dusk, backpack heavy with textbooks and a cash envelope tucked deep in my jacket pocket. I managed my time with near-manic precision, color-coding a calendar above my desk and refusing to let any single grade slip. My classmates teased me about my spreadsheet brain. I shrugged it off. Every dollar saved, every test aced, every schedule balanced meant another brick laid on the path to freedom. Back home, not much changed. Mike breezed through, borrowing $50 here or getting excused from chores because he had practice or plans. He'd crash home late and shrug off mom's worries, secure in the safety net always beneath him. I didn't hate him for it, but it shaped how I saw the world. I knew, like a secret code, that nobody was going to clean up after me or pay my debts if I failed. The idea stung, then galvanized me into action. Junior year, I started tutoring in math. Other students, sometimes their younger siblings, even a few grown-ups from the neighborhood trying to pass their GEDs. $5 per hour, every crumpled bill stashed in a worn envelope under my mattress. I began tracking every cent with the same rigor I applied to schoolwork. It wasn't about the money so much as the feeling. This was my effort, translated into real-world options. The more I earned, the more I realized how ill-prepared most teens were for the basics of life. Budgeting, balancing, saying no to unnecessary spending. So I taught myself, doubling up on the lessons I missed at home. How to avoid debt, how to choose the cheaper data plan, how to walk past the window displays at the mall without blinking. By the time other kids in my grade started worrying about student loans or wondering if they could afford senior prom, I'd already set up automatic transfers to my savings account and figured out which jobs at the local coffee house offered the best tips. Senior year, all that hustling paid off. I applied for every scholarship I could, drove myself to interviews, and mailed out applications without ever expecting a "I'm proud of you" from my parents. The day I received the letter from Ohio State, full scholarship, finance major, I sat on the porch, alone, rereading it until the late evening sun dipped below the oaks. I made a quiet promise to myself that night. I'd keep building on this independence. No matter what curveballs came, this foundation could carry me further than anyone else's applause. That summer, I almost never saw my parents. Mike was off at college, after barely scraping in, and the house felt eerily quiet. I picked up another job at the farmer's market, setting up at dawn, learning to negotiate with vendors and memorize prices. Sarah, my manager at the bookstore, started letting me handle cash outs and even ordering new inventory. The extra responsibility wasn't glamorous, but it felt like proof that my choices mattered. I could depend on myself. By August, I'd saved enough for a used laptop and all the random college essentials that so many kids take for granted. I didn't throw a party or even post online. Instead, I rode my bike across town one last time, shot a photo of the empty bookstore from the sidewalk, and felt a deep, pure sense of pride. Growing up that way wasn't easy, but looking back, I know those hard, lonely choices forged something inside me tougher than any classroom lesson could. College, stepping into the wide world, walking onto the campus of Ohio State University for the first time. I felt a rush of nervous excitement surge through me, a sense that I was finally crossing a threshold into the life I'd always wanted. I was 18, with my whole future ahead of me. Columbus was bigger and buzzier than any place I'd ever lived, but everything about it, the sprawling brick buildings, the clock tower, the endless crowds of students hurrying between classes, seemed to hum with promise. Securing a full scholarship to study finance had felt like winning the lottery. After years of keeping my nose to the grindstone, budgeting every dollar, and dreaming of independence during quiet nights in my childhood bedroom, I had earned a place here entirely on my own merit. There was no small amount of pride in arriving without debts or obligations. Unlike some of my new classmates, I didn't have to worry about the shadow of student loans creeping over my shoulder. But college, I learned quickly, was more than just a fresh start. It was a test of my discipline, of my adaptability, and of my ability to hold on to myself while letting the world in. My first semester blurred by in a rush of orientation activities and new faces. The dorms buzzed with late-night laughter. The shared bathrooms echoed with stories exchanged between strangers who quickly became friends, or at least comfortable acquaintances. For the first few days, I barely unpacked, living out of suitcases and trying to find my place in an unfamiliar routine. My roommate, Dana, a biology major from Cincinnati, was messy, boisterous, and completely at home in the chaos. "You know, you're the most organized person I've ever seen," she told me one night as I filed class syllabi into color-coded folders. I smiled, a little embarrassed, but order was how I kept anxiety at bay. Behind every neat binder and spreadsheet was the memory of years spent making sure nothing slipped through the cracks at home. Now, with nobody watching my every move but myself, structure was my shield. Majoring in finance was both a challenge and a comfort. The logic of numbers, the mosaic of financial markets, and the thrill of piecing together balance sheets fascinated me. I threw myself into classes, determined not just to pass, but to stand out. I volunteered for group projects and relied on late-night study sessions in the business building's glass-walled commons. Sometimes, I would look out over the quiet campus as midnight rolled in, feeling both the weight and thrill of freedom. No parents hovering, no expectations but my own. Just the satisfaction of watching the compound effect of hard work. Still, college brought new financial pressures. Scholarships paid for tuition and basic fees. But everyday life in a big city meant expenses added up fast. Textbooks, meal plans, late-night coffee runs, and the occasional emergency trip to the drugstore. There was pride in never calling home for help, no matter how tight my budget got. Instead, I took a job in the student finance office, spending 10 hours a week after classes answering questions at the help desk filing paperwork, and running numbers for the department's bean counters. The pay was modest, but every 2 weeks, when my paycheck dropped into my savings account, I felt a spark of that old pride from my high school days. Managing my money was half science, half stubbornness. Each month, I tracked every cent: rent, bills, groceries, even splurges on used books, or the occasional late-night pizza with friends. My finances were simple, but they were mine. Spreadsheets mapped out my infrequent luxuries and forecasted my needs through graduation. Some classmates joked that my careful habits made me the mom of our friend group, but I let it roll off my back. They didn't know what it meant to fear losing everything you'd built. Outside of work and school, college was a second education in life skills and in finding where I fit. I joined Beta Alpha Psi, a business fraternity with a reputation for its tough admissions and rigorous professional development program. Every Friday, I put on my best blazer and walked into meetings with upperclassmen in tailored suits, all of us hungry for internships and driven by ambition. I attended resume workshops and shadowed professionals, making connections that would later pay off in unexpected ways. Socially, life ebbed and flowed. There were parties, sometimes wild, mixers with other dorms, crisp fall football games where it seemed like the whole campus bled scarlet and gray. I'd never cared much for crowds, so I learned to balance saying yes to new experiences with listening to the quiet that still comforted me. Not every night was spent in celebration. Many weekends I chose to stay in, curled up with case studies, or catching up with Dana about the absurdities of campus life. The years passed with their own rhythm. My sophomore summer, I hustled through an internship at a local bank, spending my days shadowing analysts, organizing client files, and absorbing everything I could about the industry. The work was sometimes menial, but I knew every skill added up. My supervisor, Mr. Hawkins, a gruff Boston transplant, saw something in me. "You ask good questions," he told me once after a meeting. "That's worth a lot more than a fancy diploma." By junior year, I was tutoring underclassmen in accounting and personal finance, sometimes paid, more often just to help out. It felt right to pay forward what I'd learned, knowing that my experience navigating finances had been hard-won. In those sessions, I met students from all backgrounds, children of wealth, first-generation college attendees, and even folks trying to recover from early credit card disasters. Those nights, sitting in the cafeteria over stacks of textbooks, I realized how rare my vigilance was and how grateful I was for it. Outside of academics, I fell for Columbus, its vibrant riverfront, the indie coffee shops hidden in brick alleyways, the fall leaves painting the world gold each October. I started to run around the Olentangy Trail in the mornings, letting the cool air and steady rhythm of my shoes clear my head. In the city's heartbeat, I found my own. When graduation approached, I felt prepared and empowered, clear-eyed about my next move, and fiercely protective of what I'd built. I graduated with honors, no debt, a healthy savings account, and a handful of professional certifications under my belt. Standing on the stadium field, cap and gown in the May sunshine, I swallowed a rush of pride. My family didn't come to the ceremony. Distance and strained ties saw to that. But I wasn't lonely. I looked out at my classmates, the faculty who had guided me, and the city that had become a piece of my heart, and I knew I could start anywhere. Embarking on my journey into the workforce, I left Ohio State with more than a degree. I left transformed with the grit, independence, and hopefulness for a life that, for the first time, truly felt like mine. The family earthquake In the decision, I'll never regret nothing, could have prepared me for the seismic shift that rattled through my quiet, intentional life on that fateful Sunday evening. Until then, I'd built my days with careful precision. Hard work, routine, the comfort of plans and budgets that always balanced. I believed if I lived sensibly, if I saved diligently and never made waves, I would be safe from the kind of chaos I'd sometimes witnessed in other families. But chaos has a way of finding you, especially when loyalty and money are on the table. What struck me first that evening wasn't just my brother's confession. It was the sense that something huge was already brewing beneath the surface. A storm my family had been pretending not to see. We had gathered around the dinner table, as we always did. Roast chicken steaming on the serving platter, mashed potatoes, Mom's green beans, the kitchen lit, bright against the dusk outside. There was a heaviness in the air I couldn't quite place, but I ignored it, telling myself it was just the Sunday blues, a brief, passing sadness before another work week began. Halfway through dinner, my older brother, let's call him Lucas, put down his fork, every muscle in his jaw tense. He swallowed, and the room seemed to breathe in with him, all eyes turning. Then the words came, blunt as a fist. I need help. I'm in trouble. Big trouble. Lucas's confession spilled out in spurts and fragments, his voice laced with shame, but also an edge of defiance that made my chest tighten. Gambling debts, a six-figure hole, desperate, reckless decisions made over the last year that he'd kept hidden from us all. I didn't mean for it to get so bad, he said, not quite meeting my eyes. But I need you, Rachel. I need you to bail me out. I sat frozen, fork halfway to my mouth, every instinct screaming for more information. For a moment, my parents were silent. Then, quietly at first, Dad spoke. We can't let your brother lose everything. You're the only one who can help. Mom's lips were pressed in a thin, quivering line, her eyes fixed on me. Suddenly, every achievement, every bit of discipline and independence I'd built over the years felt like nothing more than a target. I wanted to believe this conversation was a nightmare, but the voices around me grew louder, more insistent. My brother didn't just ask, he demanded, "Give me your savings. Co-sign on the house. It's only fair. We're family, right?" In that moment, I felt the axis of my world tilt. All the sacrifices I'd made, choosing work over parties, saving when friends splurged, giving up vacations and designer shoes, eliminating every penny of waste just to feel secure. None of it mattered to them. In their eyes, I was just a resource, their fallback plan. I tried to reason, tried to explain how those savings were my future, my hope for one day buying a home or having a life without fear of sudden disaster. My father cut me off, his voice trembling with anger. "After all we've given you, you'd turn your back on your brother?" My mother's tone grew icy and brittle. Think about what this means for us. Right then, guilt hit me like a tidal wave. Didn't I owe them something? Weren't families supposed to stick together, no matter the cost? But underneath the guilt, another voice, a long dormant voice of self-preservation, started to gather strength. I stared at Lucas, then at my parents, and knew if I gave in, everything I'd worked for would be lost. Worse, it wouldn't fix anything long-term for any of us. Clarity came like a slap. I pushed back my chair. "I'm sorry. I can't do it. My future isn't collateral for someone else's mistakes." The rage and disappointment that followed was volcanic. My father rose from the table, jaw set, eyes burning. "I never thought I'd see the day you'd abandon your family when we needed you most." My mother's voice, sliced and sharper, If you can't support us now, don't bother coming back. I realized then that this wasn't just about money. It was about power and the narrative they'd constructed for years. The dutiful daughter, always reliable, always making the responsible choice, shouldering the burdens others dropped. Refusing them wasn't just defiance. To them, it was betrayal. I left shaking, each step away from the house, feeling both heavier and more liberating. When I got home, hands trembling, I logged into every shared account, locking each tighter than a vault. My mind raced. Would they try to access my money? I had to be sure they couldn't. The phone buzzed relentlessly with calls, voicemails, angry texts, every word an accusation, a plea, or a manipulation. My stomach twisted, but I stood firm. The life I'd built could not be the price for erasing someone else's debts. That night, as I lay awake, I let grief and anger have their say. I mourned the loss of the family I thought I had, the myth that my sacrifices would buy me love or loyalty. But beneath the exhaustion, something new began to grow. Resolve. I am not responsible for saving everyone. I am not selfish for saying no. The rules had always been uneven. The expectations always doubled. I was finished handing over my future for a version of family that only wanted me when I was useful. That Sunday night marked my real adulthood. For the first time, I saw my life, not as a series of obligations, but as something I got to choose. And though the rupture with my family brought its own loneliness, it also brought freedom. In the months that followed, their calls grew fewer, replaced by angry posts on social media, whispers through mutual friends, rumors and blame disguised as concern. But something inside me had changed permanently. I'd drawn a line, and I refused to cross it again. Sometimes, late at night, I still replay that dinner in my mind. Could I have done something differently? Should I have given in? But the answer, always, is no, because my future is mine, and no one, no matter how close, no matter their need, has the right to demand I give it up. In standing my ground, I lost a great deal, but I gained my self-worth, my autonomy, and a hard-won sense of peace that no amount of family approval could ever provide. Stepping into the light, Austin, a new chance at freedom. When the stress reached its breaking point, it felt as if my life was suspended in the uneasy quiet that follows a storm. I desperately needed distance from my family's unending expectations, from the ghosts of guilt and betrayal, from the version of myself that existed purely in reaction to others' demands. The opportunity came not with fanfare, but with the soft ping of an email from James, an old colleague who had just landed a senior role at a prestigious finance company in Austin. "We have an opening here," he wrote. "Decent pay, relocation support, potential for growth. You'd fit right in. Think about it." I stared at that email for hours. Dallas, for all its towering buildings and tangled highways, now felt too small, too full of old echoes. I knew if I stayed, it would only be a matter of time before I was pulled back into tracking family budgets, fielding panicked phone calls, or even seeing my hard-earned security slip again. The road out was lit by the soft green of a job offer and the shaky spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could be more than the reliable fixer. After a restless night and some tearful calls to the one friend who understood the depth of my exhaustion, I accepted the position. 2 weeks later, my tiny hatchback was packed to the roof, each box a physical boundary between my old life and the new one I desperately wanted. Austin greeted me with warmth in every sense of the word. Gone were the gray days. Here, sunlight bounced off the river, and the city buzzed with possibility. Real, everyday people walked their dogs past vibrant murals or laughed over coffee under the live oaks. For the first time in years, I felt anonymous, gloriously so, a face in the crowd, free from assumptions or old reputations. I moved into a small, sunlit apartment southeast of downtown. No more parents in the next town, no more unannounced visits, no more sitting on the edge of my bed, dreading a family group chat notification. My first week at the new job was a dizzy blur. The office was modern and open, with teams collaborating around long maple tables instead of hiding in cubicles. The culture came as a shock. Nobody here cared that I'd once been a family anchor, or that I'd spent half my life worrying about someone else's needs. They only cared about my ideas, my capacity for solving problems, my drive. James introduced me to Kelly, a local Austinite with a wry sense of humor and an unmatched knowledge of the best taco trucks and food festivals. She took it upon herself to make me feel welcome. Whether it was exploring food truck fusions or gawky, laughter-filled attempts at salsa dancing, I started to say yes to life in a way I never had before. Evenings found me wandering the hike and bike trail by Lady Bird Lake, letting the city's hum seep into my bones and relax muscles that had been tense for years. At first, my mind kept circling back to the ghosts I left behind, wondering how my family fared, whether my brother had found new trouble. The difference was, I let these thoughts move through me instead of stalking my every step. Therapy appointments with Dr. Margaret Cole, my first real investment in mental health, were a lifeline. With her help, I unpacked years of guilt and learned that boundaries are not weapons, but shields, and self-respect is not selfishness. My weekends, once spent anxiously awaiting a family emergency or planning my parents' logistics, turned into something softer and more expansive. Sometimes I joined Kelly and her friends at the outdoor markets, soaking up live music or just people watching. Other Saturdays, I claimed entire days just for myself, reading in cozy cafes, journaling at the Greenbelt, savoring the quiet thrill of being accountable only to me. There was power in my newfound solitude. Moments that might have once felt like loneliness now shimmered with peace. I began to rediscover what joy felt like when it didn't come attached to someone else's approval or need. The city itself nudged me toward reinvention. I took up running in the mornings, letting sweat and sunshine work together to cleanse the anxiety from my mind. I even signed up for adult improv classes, terrifying at first, then exhilarating, learning to be less afraid of mistakes and more curious about possibility. For the first time in my adult life, I acted on what I wanted without seeking permission or bracing myself for backlash. In those first few months, I made it my mission to turn my apartment into a real home, however humble. Old hand-me-down furniture was replaced with pieces I chose for their warmth and personality. I splurged on a thrift store rug in riotous burnt orange and blue, hangings from the local artist market, and a handful of cozy lamps. There was a magnet on my fridge that read, "You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep others warm." A small daily reminder of the painful lessons I'd learned and what I refused to repeat. Therapy helped me process more than just the acute aftermath of my family's demands. We dug into the habits I'd learned growing up, the way I retreated in silence during conflict, the pattern of deferring to louder voices, the impulse to blend into the background. Slowly, with intention, and a lot of uncomfortable conversations with myself, I practiced saying no without explanation, and yes, only when I truly meant it. Margaret, my therapist, reminded me often, Your value is not in your utility to others, but in the fullness of your own life. Along the way, I found a new kind of community. It wasn't just the colleagues who respected my boundaries, or Kelly's loyal invitations to join in on life's little adventures. I started volunteering at the local community center, leading free workshops on basic financial literacy, a skill I had honed through years of making do and saving every spare cent. It felt meaningful in a way that nothing transactional ever could, helping others build the tools that had taken me so long and so much pain to master myself. There were setbacks, of course, moments when the old patterns threatened to creep back in, especially when calls from my parents or cousin Monica broke through my careful boundaries. Their voices sometimes carried the same mix of accusation, disappointment, and need. I learned, finally, not to let those words take root. The Austin skyline at twilight, the aroma of grilling carne asada wafting through my open windows, the knowledge that each choice was truly mine, all became part of my armor. By the end of my first 6 months in Austin, I learned to recognize freedom, not as a grand gesture or a single brave act, but as a daily, ongoing practice. It was found in silent mornings with coffee on the balcony, in laughter over failed dance steps, in the simple power to silence my phone and bask in contentment rather than obligation. The old ache of family fractures dulled into something less jagged, a reminder of what I'd survived, tempered by gratitude for what was blooming in its place. Here, under the Texan sun, I emerged from the shadow of my past. I discovered that a new life doesn't erase hardship, but it does allow you, one hard-won, gentle day at a time, to write an ending all your own, growing up from ruin, giving back and growing. Forward to 6 months after I arrived in Austin, I found myself standing on the balcony of my tiny apartment, the city lights twinkling beneath the soft Texas sky. I was surrounded not by the voices of obligation or the echo of old wounds, but by the gentle hush of real, hard-earned peace. The struggle of those years, the tightrope walk between self-preservation and family guilt, had finally delivered me here, resilient, changed, and quietly proud of the woman looking back at me in the window. There's something strange about surviving chaos. For a long time, I thought healing would mean forgetting, that I'd have to bury all those Sunday night showdowns, slammed doors, threats, and the cold aftermath that followed my refusal to be the family parachute. But I learned that growth comes from facing the mess, not erasing it. The pain lingers, but so does the wisdom. I look at the old scars with a kind of compassion now. Every sleepless night and every argument that drove me further away from home hardened me. Yes, but they also planted the seeds of the life I'm building now. Austin, with its wild murals, eclectic festivals, and community spirit, became a place where I could try on new versions of myself. I volunteered at a local youth center every Saturday, leading workshops on financial literacy and personal growth, watching young people's faces light up as they realized they could take control of their own money, their dreams, their futures. It filled something in me I hadn't realized was empty. I was teaching the lessons I'd once learned the hard way. How to say no, how to set a boundary, how to believe your worth isn't measured by how much you give up for other people. At work, my confidence flourished. The finance firm that once felt intimidating became my arena for new victories, big and small. I joined committees, presented at monthly meetings, and even mentored a few interns who reminded me of my younger, uncertain self. James, my old friend, and now my colleague, would sometimes laugh and say, "You know you're not just surviving anymore. right? You're really living. Still, old habits sometimes haunt me. I'd catch myself feeling guilt when I ignored another call from my parents or scrolled past another social media jab from relatives who still hadn't forgiven me for protecting my future. I didn't reply, not because I lacked love, but because I finally understood that love shouldn't require the destruction of your own life. Sometimes, late at night, I lay awake and wish things could be different. But the regret never outweighs the gratitude for my newfound self-respect. That summer, one message hit my inbox. My cousin Monica wrote, "Paul's in trouble again. Grandma is sick, worrying. They all miss you." I let the message sit unread for days. The old urge to rescue, to explain myself, to drive across 3 states and put out fires. It tugged at me, but I remembered the vow I made on my first night in Austin. I can't save everyone, and I don't owe anyone an apology for saving myself. Instead, I sent Monica a brief note of encouragement, offered her links to free credit counseling, and, perhaps more importantly, wished her the wisdom and backbone I'd finally earned. Then I turned back to the new life I was building, bit by bit, day by steadily brighter day. I found new traditions that belonged only to me. Sunday brunches with friends who became like chosen family. Quiet mornings journaling alone in my favorite coffee shop. Long evening runs along the river, my breath a quiet promise. I will never trade my peace for anyone else's storm again. Sometimes, on volunteer days, a student would linger after class,
Doctor, hold on.
ask me how I got here, how I found the courage to say no to family, how I built something new from so much pain. I would tell them the truth. Resilience isn't a lightning strike. It's the sum of every hard choice, every small act of self-respect. You grow, not in spite of the ruins, but because of them. The deeper I leaned into my own freedom, the more I saw my value beyond what I could do for others. I started a blog about financial empowerment and the emotional side of independence, about shedding guilt, setting boundaries, and rewriting what family means. The responses poured in from strangers and old friends alike, people who'd been reduced to safety nets, who'd carried their siblings' debts, who had lost themselves in the shadow of expectation. We were, all of us, rebuilding. Reading their stories made me feel less alone, but also prouder for stepping out of the darkness. I forgive my family, not because they deserve it, but because I deserve to lay down the baggage. I wish them well. I hope they learn, and I hope my brother finally finds his own bottom and his own way up. But I refuse to offer up my future on the altar of their mistakes anymore. As autumn returned, ushering in cooler evenings and city lights that glimmered through my window, I settled fully into myself. My life isn't effortless, and the past is never entirely gone. But the scars sing a different song now. They are proof I survived, and guideposts for the life I am still determined to shape. Choice by stubborn, hopeful choice. There's no fairy tale ending, only the real, ongoing work of giving back, standing tall, and living honestly. So here I am, offering my story to anyone who needs it, to remind you that boundaries can heal, and you don't have to become the person your family expects in order to be whole. Share your own story with me, if you wish. Together, we grow. Not from what shattered us, but from what we dared to build back, kinder and stronger after the storm.